She lay on the shoulder of Seattle's busiest highway, her body trembling beneath a curtain of freezing fog. Her eyes were sealed shut with layers of black duct tape. Her back legs were cinched together with thick industrial zip ties, biting into skin and bone. Yet she wasn't struggling to flee. She wasn't clawing at the restraints or dragging herself away from danger. Instead, she pressed her body flat against the asphalt, using herself as a shield for the tiny, dying puppy curled against her belly. She couldn't see the semi-trucks screaming past only inches from her face. She could only hear them, each roar a promise of annihilation. Whoever left her there had meant for the morning rush hour to finish the job, to erase her completely beneath steel wheels and indifferent commuters. But she refused to move. She stayed still. She held the line. Thousands of drivers passed her that morning. Thousands looked but didn't see. Until one man did. Elias Thorne didn't just discover a dog on the side of the road that day. He found a soldier standing her post. What happened next would shatter a heart already cracked by grief, and then rebuild it into something stronger than before. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe loyalty should never go unanswered, hit that subscribe button, because this story might be the most powerful thing you hear all year. Seattle fog doesn't simply blur the city. It devours it. That morning, it rolled in thick and wet from the Puget Sound, swallowing skyscrapers, muting sound, and turning Interstate 5 into a narrow tunnel of concrete and exhaust. The skyline vanished entirely, replaced by slick black pavement and the relentless whoosh of massive trucks slicing through the mist like unseen beasts. Elias Thorne gripped the steering wheel of his battered 2008 Ford F-150, his knuckles bleaching white. He was 55, built from hard lines and old endurance, with steel-gray hair and a face carved by years of harsh weather and harsher memories. The faded flannel jacket he wore had survived decades better than he had. His eyes, once sharp, tactical, were dulled by a weight that never lifted. "Visibility's near zero," Elias muttered, his voice rough as gravel. He glanced toward the passenger seat. It was empty. Just a wrinkled hardware store receipt and a travel mug of coffee gone cold an hour ago. "You always hated driving in this soup," he said quietly. "You'd be telling me to slow down right now, even though we're barely pushing 40. He paused, waiting out of habit. Waiting for laughter that never came. It was the 3rd anniversary of Sarah's death, and silence had become heavier every year since, settling into the truck like dust no one ever wiped away. Elias was driving north toward Evergreen Memorial Park. In the back seat rested a bundle of white lilies wrapped in plastic. Sarah loved lilies. She used to say they looked like trumpets announcing good news. Elias didn't believe there was any good news left in the world. But a Marine doesn't abandon his post, even when that post is a grave marker in the rain. Traffic on I-5 was chaos. Red brake lights bloomed suddenly in the fog, then vanished just as fast. Cargo trucks hauling timber and steel thundered past, shaking the ground and Elias's truck with raw force. He stayed in the slow lane, his gaze sweeping the shoulder out of instinct drilled into him decades earlier. In the Corps, you learn that the threat you don't see is the one that kills you. Then he saw it. At first, it looked like road debris, shredded tire rubber, maybe. But as his headlights cut through a thin break in the fog, the shape felt wrong. Too tall. Too solid. Then it moved. Just a twitch. A flinch. Elias felt his pulse spike. What the hell? His eyes snapped to the mirrors. There was a gap behind him. He didn't hesitate. He steered hard onto the emergency shoulder, gravel crunching beneath the tires. He slammed the gear into park and hit the hazard lights. Click. Clack. Click. Clack. The only orderly sound in the chaos. He opened the door and the highway roared at him, diesel fumes, wet pine, cold air stinging his lungs. His boots hit the pavement with a heavy thud as he stepped out. Elias was a big man, 6'2", broad-shouldered from a lifetime of carrying weight meant to break people. But those shoulders sagged now, bowed by something invisible and far heavier. 10 yards ahead, right near the thin white line separating safety from death, lay two dark shapes. As he drew closer, something inside him snapped. It was a German shepherd. She lay flat in the grime of the breakdown lane, her ribs stark beneath muddy, matted fur. But her condition wasn't what stole the breath from Elias's lungs. It was her posture. She was curled tightly around a small, shaking bundle of fur pressed against her belly. A puppy. Trapped. Elias stepped closer, and the full horror revealed itself. Her hind legs were bound together with thick zip ties. Her face, God, her face was wrapped tightly in duct tape, blinding her completely. She couldn't see the cars screaming past just feet away. She could only hear them. The puppy was blindfolded too. "Oh God," Elias whispered. A logging truck blasted past in the right lane, the force of displaced air slamming into him. The mother dog didn't run. She couldn't. Instead, she flattened herself further against the pavement, pressing her body over the puppy as the world shook around her. She flinched violently, but she didn't move. Terrified. Blind. Bound. And still unwilling to abandon her child. Elias felt something tear open inside his chest. He'd seen this before, Marines throwing themselves on grenades, fathers shielding children from falling rubble. The geometry of sacrifice never changes. "Hold on," Elias said, his voice slipping into a command tone he hadn't used in years. "Hold on, Mama. I've got you." But he knew better than to rush in. A blind, terrified dog was a live weapon. Panic could send her straight under a truck. First rule, secure the perimeter. Elias sprinted back to his truck, his bad knee screaming. He yanked open the back door and grabbed a case of road flares. He struck one. Hiss. A blade of brilliant red fire cut through the fog. Elias stepped boldly into the right lane of the interstate. He didn't wave. He didn't panic. He stood tall, arm extended, posture unyielding. He wasn't a grieving widower anymore. He was Staff Sergeant Thorne. Cars screeched. Horns blared. Tires screamed on wet asphalt. Elias walked the flare backward 50 yards, forcing traffic to merge left, carving out a pocket of safety around the dogs. He dropped the first flare. Lit another. Placed it closer. The red glow revealed the terror on the mother's face. Her ears flicked wildly, tracking sound she couldn't understand. She growled low, not as a threat, but as a warning born of desperation. Elias approached slowly and dropped to a crouch. "Easy," he murmured. "I know you're scared. I know you can't see me. But the cavalry's here, sweetheart." The puppy whimpered. The mother nudged him blindly with her nose, checking that he was still there. Someone had done this. Bound them. Blinded them. Left them to die. Elias swallowed the rage. Anger wouldn't save them. Calm would. "I'm coming in," he said softly. "I'm going to take the dark away." She snapped at the air, teeth missing his hand by inches. Elias didn't retreat. "That's it," he whispered. "You're a warrior. You held the line." He knelt in the wet gravel, rain soaking through his jeans, and extended his open palm. She sniffed, coffee, old flannel, smoke from the flare. She didn't bite. Her head sagged slightly. She was running on nothing but love. "I've got you," Elias whispered. Inside the circle of red light, the world narrowed to 3 souls breathing together. And the rescue had only just begun. The highway still screamed beyond the ring of flares, but inside that red-lit pocket, time moved differently. Elias stayed on his knees, his body low and non-threatening, his breathing slow and deliberate. The German shepherd's muscles trembled beneath soaked fur, every sinew locked tight, her mind trapped in darkness and noise. She couldn't see him. She could only feel the vibration of his voice and smell the strange mix of man, rain, and burning magnesium. Elias shifted his weight carefully, testing the ground before committing. Gravel bit into his knees, but he ignored it. Pain was familiar. Panic was not allowed. "I'm Elias," he said quietly, keeping his voice steady beneath the thunder of passing trucks. "I'm going to get you out of here. But you have to let me." Her ears twitched at the sound of his name. She growled again, lower now, uncertain rather than furious. The puppy whimpered softly, a weak sound that sliced straight through Elias's chest. The mother nudged the small body again, checking, reassuring, promising protection even as her own strength faded. Elias reached for the duct tape. He didn't touch it yet. He needed her to know what was coming. "I'm going to take the dark away," he murmured. "It's going to feel strange. Don't fight me." He slid his hand forward inch by inch until his fingers brushed the edge of the tape. The mother dog snapped reflexively, jaws clacking shut on empty air. Elias froze. He didn't pull back. He didn't advance. "Easy," he breathed. "You're safe. You did good." The tone mattered more than the words. Authority without aggression. Command without threat. Seconds stretched. The growl softened. Her breathing slowed. Elias peeled the tape back slowly, wincing as fur came with it. He worked gently but decisively. When the last strip came free, the dog blinked furiously, pupils blown wide as light and color rushed back in. She flinched, disoriented, her head whipping back and forth as she tried to understand the sudden return of sight. Elias stayed perfectly still. She locked eyes with him. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then she sagged. Her body collapsed forward, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. Elias lunged just in time, catching her chest before she hit the pavement. She let out a long, shuddering exhale, the sound of a fighter finally lowering her guard. "That's it," Elias whispered. "I've got you." The puppy stirred weakly. Elias reached for him next, removing the tape from his tiny eyes. The little body was frighteningly light in his hands, ribs sharp beneath thin fur. The puppy whimpered once, then went quiet again. Too quiet. Elias felt a cold spike of fear. He didn't have time to waste. He moved fast now, unhooking the zip ties from the mother's legs, cursing under his breath at the raw skin beneath. He scooped the puppy up first, cradling him against his chest as he hurried toward the truck. The flares hissed behind him, burning down as traffic continued to roar past. He opened the passenger door and laid the puppy gently on the seat, wrapping him in an old wool blanket that still smelled faintly of Sarah. Then he turned back for the mother. She tried to stand and failed, her legs buckling beneath her. Elias slid his arms under her body and lifted, muscles straining, his bad knee flaring with sharp protest. He grunted, breath hissing through clenched teeth, but he didn't let go. "I know," he muttered. "I know it hurts." He eased her into the cab, settling her on the floorboard beneath the puppy. She curled instinctively toward him, nose brushing the seat, breathing in the scent of her child. Elias slammed the door shut. The roar of the interstate vanished. Inside the truck, there was only breath, warmth, and the ticking of the cooling engine. Elias climbed into the driver's seat, hands shaking now that the danger had passed. He looked at them, at the mother curled protectively below, at the small, fragile bundle on the seat above her. "I need names," he said softly, starting the engine. "Can't just call you, dog." The heater blasted to life, flooding the cab with warm air. Elias merged back onto the highway, pushing the old F-150 faster than he should have, eyes flicking constantly to the passenger seat. The puppy didn't move. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Elias reached over, lifting the corner of the blanket. The puppy lay limp, tongue pale, chest still. "No," Elias whispered. "No, no, no." He checked the mirrors, swerved hard onto the shoulder, gravel exploding beneath the tires. He was out of the truck before it stopped moving. Elias slammed the puppy onto the hood, ripping the tape fully away. The metal was warm from the engine, vibrating faintly. He placed his thumbs carefully on the tiny ribcage. 1, 2, 3. He compressed gently, terrified of crushing fragile bones. He leaned down and breathed into the puppy's snout, short controlled puffs. Nothing. Inside the truck, the mother began to whine, a frantic sound clawing at the windows. "Stay," Elias barked reflexively, though she couldn't obey. 1, 2, 3. Time blurred. Sweat mixed with rain. His arms trembled. A voice inside him whispered to stop. To accept it. "Shut up," Elias growled aloud. He pressed harder. Felt a rib crack. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and kept going. He struck the puppy's chest once with a sharp blow. Thump. For a moment, nothing. Then the puppy gasped. A wet, choking inhale rattled through his body. Another followed, shallow and weak but unmistakably alive. Elias sagged against the hood, breath shuddering out of him like a prayer finally answered. "That's it," he whispered. "That's it, kid." He wrapped the puppy inside his jacket, skin to skin, feeling the fragile flutter of a heartbeat against his own. When he climbed back into the truck, the mother dog pressed her nose against him, sniffing frantically. "He's here," Elias told her. "He's still here." He floored the gas. They were not done fighting yet. The Ford F-150 thundered down the highway, its engine pushed harder than Elias usually dared. The speedometer crept past 70, then 75. He didn't look at it. His eyes stayed locked on the road ahead, jaw clenched, one hand gripping the wheel while the other pressed the tiny, trembling body of the puppy against his chest beneath his flannel jacket. The puppy's heartbeat fluttered weakly against Elias's sternum, erratic, fragile, but there. Elias matched his breathing to it, slow and deliberate, as if his own lungs could lend strength to the failing rhythm. "Stay with me, Scout," he murmured without realizing he'd chosen the name. "You're not done yet." On the passenger side floorboard, the mother dog lay curled tightly, her head resting on her paws. The adrenaline that had kept her upright on the highway was gone now, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. But her ears never stopped moving, tracking every vibration of the truck, every shift in sound. She didn't sleep. She guarded. Elias glanced down at her. "You're a fighter," he said quietly. "A real one." The city rushed past in a blur of gray concrete and wet asphalt as the fog slowly began to thin. Skeletal trees emerged along the roadside, their bare branches clawing at the sky. Elias checked the rearview mirror again, not for traffic, but for the subtle rise and fall beneath his jacket. Still breathing. The emergency veterinary clinic came into view like a mirage at the edge of his vision. Elias hit the brakes hard, tires screeching as he swung into the parking lot and skidded to a stop near the entrance. He was out of the truck in seconds. The automatic doors slid open with a mechanical hiss as Elias burst inside, clutching the puppy like a lifeline. "I need help," he shouted, his voice echoing off sterile white walls. "Now." The waiting room froze. A woman holding a sneezing cat stared wide-eyed. An elderly man clutched a hamster cage, his mouth hanging open. A young veterinarian appeared almost instantly, her movements sharp and practiced. She was in her early 30s, hair pulled into a messy bun, purple-framed glasses perched on her nose. Her scrubs were patterned with paw prints, but her eyes were pure focus. "What happened?" she demanded, already signaling for a gurney. "Puppy stopped breathing," Elias rasped, pulling Scout from his jacket. "I got him back. He's crashing. And the mother, she's in the truck." Bound. Blindfolded. The vet's expression hardened. Get him into the incubator. Oxygen and fluids, now. She turned to Elias. Bring the mother through the side entrance. Slowly. The next hour dissolved into controlled chaos. Techs moved fast and silent, hands efficient, voices clipped. Scout was whisked away, swallowed by glass and tubing and blinking monitors. Elias stood frozen for a moment, staring after him, until a nurse touched his arm. Sir. The mother. Elias nodded and went back outside. Valkyrie, he knew her name now, didn't resist when he lifted her from the truck. The fight had drained out of her completely. She trembled in his arms, body heavy and unresponsive as he carried her into the clinic. When they placed her on the steel exam table, she didn't lift her head. The vet cut away the remaining zip ties. The skin beneath was raw, angry, bleeding in places. Dehydrated, the vet murmured. Severely malnourished. Calcium depletion. She shouldn't even be standing. Elias folded his arms tight across his chest, nails digging into his palms. When they finally sedated Valkyrie, the clinic grew quiet. The monitors beeped steadily. Scout was stable, for now. Valkyrie slept deeply, the kind of sleep that comes only after the body gives up pretending it's okay. Later, when the crisis had passed and exhaustion settled over the clinic like a fog of its own, the vet approached Elias again. I'm Dr. Sarah Miller, she said. You did good out there. Elias shook his head. Just did what needed doing. Sarah studied him for a moment. I've seen combat injuries, she said carefully. And I've seen cruelty. This, she gestured toward Valkyrie, this was deliberate. She peeled back part of the dog's fur, revealing old scars beneath the fresh ones. Bite marks. Burn scars. A jagged line along her belly that made Elias's stomach twist. She's been used, Sarah said quietly. Overbred. Abused. Discarded. Elias stared at the sleeping dog, her chest rising and falling slowly. And when she broke, he said, voice low, they threw her away. Sarah nodded. She gave everything she had to keep that puppy alive. Elias reached out and rested his hand gently on Valkyrie's head. Her fur was warm now. Safe. She's done, he whispered. Her watch is over. It was past midnight when the clinic finally settled into silence. Sarah offered Elias a cab. He refused. Said he lived too far. It was a lie. He just couldn't leave. The waiting room lights were dimmed. Elias sat in a plastic chair, staring at a faded poster about heartworm prevention, his knee bouncing nervously. Every sound made him flinch. Every closing door echoed like a gunshot in his mind. At 2 a.m, the screaming started. Metal clanged violently from the recovery wing, followed by frantic barking that tore through the quiet like broken glass. Elias was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. He burst through the staff-only doors. Valkyrie was awake. She was slamming herself against the kennel bars, claws scrabbling against steel, foam flecking her muzzle. Her eyes were wild, unfocused, her body locked in a full panic spiral. The cage wasn't a hospital to her. It was the past. She's going to rip her stitches, Sarah said urgently, syringe in hand. No, Elias said, stepping between her and the kennel. She's scared. Elias. Give me a minute. He sat down on the cold tile floor with his back to the cage, exposing his neck without hesitation. He closed his eyes and breathed through the rising tide of his own panic. Then he began to hum. Low. Steady. From the halls of Montezuma. The sound cut through the chaos like a hand through water. Valkyrie's thrashing slowed. Her barking broke into confused whines. Elias kept humming, turning a marching song into a lullaby. I'm here, he said softly. I've got the watch. Behind him, the crashing stopped. A heavy body slid down the metal wall. And for the first time in years, Elias slept sitting up, guarding someone else's dreams. Morning came slowly, creeping into the clinic on pale bands of light that stretched across linoleum floors and stainless steel counters. Elias woke with a sharp jerk, his spine protesting as he shifted from the floor. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he heard it, the soft, rhythmic breathing behind him. He turned carefully. Valkyrie lay curled inside the kennel, her massive head resting on her paws. Her eyes were closed, her body still. Not drugged. Not sedated. Just sleeping. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Dr. Sarah Miller stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. She hadn't interrupted him the night before. She'd simply observed, clinical curiosity giving way to something quieter and more human. She hasn't slept like that since she arrived, Sarah said softly. You grounded her. Elias rubbed his face with both hands. She thought she was back there. Wherever there is. Sarah nodded. Trauma doesn't understand cages or safety. Just memories. A nurse appeared from the back hallway. Scouts awake. Elias was on his feet instantly. They led him into the neonatal care room, where Scout lay inside a clear incubator surrounded by tubes and blinking lights. His tiny chest rose and fell in shallow but steady movements. When Elias stepped closer, the puppy stirred, nose twitching. He's a stubborn little thing, the nurse said with a tired smile. Like his mother. Elias placed 2 fingers gently against the glass. You had me worried, kid. Scout let out a faint squeak, barely audible, but unmistakably alive. Sarah leaned against the counter. He's still critical. He'll need round-the-clock care. And she glanced toward Valkyrie, she's going to need weeks of rehabilitation. Maybe months. Elias didn't hesitate. Whatever it takes. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You understand what you're saying? I do. There was a pause. We'll need to involve animal control. This was criminal abuse. Good, Elias said, his voice flat. Someone should answer for it. Animal control arrived before noon. They photographed the injuries, documented the restraints, took statements. Elias answered every question calmly, precisely, like a man giving a debrief instead of reliving a nightmare. When they finished, one of the officers closed her notebook. We'll do what we can, she said. But cases like this, they don't always get resolved. Elias met her gaze. They should. The officer nodded, uncomfortable, and left. By the afternoon, Valkyrie was awake again. She lifted her head when Elias approached, eyes tracking him with cautious recognition. She didn't growl. She didn't bare her teeth. She simply watched. Elias sat cross-legged outside the kennel. You did good, he said quietly. Your boy's hanging on. Her ears flicked forward. He's a fighter. Like you. Sarah unlocked the kennel door. She needs to walk, she said. Just a few steps. We need to see what kind of damage we're dealing with. Elias stood slowly. I'll do it. Sarah hesitated, then handed him the leash. Valkyrie froze when the door opened. Her body tensed, muscles coiling as if expecting pain. Elias didn't pull. He waited. You're in charge, he murmured. I'll follow. After a long moment, she shifted her weight. One paw slid forward. Then another. The hallway was quiet as they walked, slow, deliberate steps on trembling legs. Every few feet, Valkyrie stopped, glancing back at Elias as if checking that he was still there. I'm here, he said every time. They made it 10 steps before her legs buckled. Elias was there instantly, supporting her weight, easing her gently to the floor. She didn't fight him. She leaned into his chest, exhausted. "That's enough," Sarah said softly. Elias helped her back into the kennel and sat with her until her breathing steadied again. Hours passed. When evening fell, Sarah approached Elias with a clipboard in hand. "There's something we need to talk about." He looked up. "Scout." "He's stable," she said quickly. "For now. This is about Valkyrie." She took a breath. "Given her condition, we don't know if she'll ever be adoptable. Severe trauma. Aggression triggers. Physical damage." Elias didn't speak. "We may need to consider long-term sanctuary placement," Sarah continued. "Or." "No," Elias said, standing. The word landed heavy between them. Sarah blinked. "Elias. She's not disposable," he said, his voice steady but iron hard. "Not after what she's been through." Sarah studied him. "You're talking about taking responsibility for a deeply traumatized, possibly dangerous animal. I'm talking about not abandoning her again." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Sarah exhaled. "There's paperwork," she said. "Foster arrangements. Liability waivers." Elias nodded. "I'll sign whatever you need." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "I thought you might say that." The days that followed blurred together. Elias stayed at the clinic, sleeping in the waiting room, showering in the staff locker room when no one was looking. He learned Valkyrie's triggers, sudden movements, raised voices, the sound of jangling metal. He learned how to approach her from the front, how to announce himself with soft words before touching her. He learned her scars. He learned that she relaxed when he hummed. That she liked her ears scratched just behind the base. That she woke from nightmares with a silent scream, body locked stiff, eyes glassy and far away. And every time, Elias was there. Scout grew stronger by the day. Tubes came out. His appetite returned. When Elias held him near Valkyrie's kennel, her entire body softened, eyes following every twitch of her son. One evening, Sarah watched them together. "You're good at this," she said. Elias shook his head. "No. I'm just patient." She smiled. "Sometimes that's the same thing." A week later, the clinic doors opened to a man Elias hadn't expected to see. Tall. Square-jawed. Wearing a familiar bearing that set Elias's nerves humming before his mind caught up. The man stopped short when he saw Elias. "Staff Sergeant Thorne." Elias straightened instinctively. "That's retired, Captain." The man grinned. "Still sounds right." They stared at each other for a moment before recognition slammed into place. "Hayes," Elias said quietly. "Captain Robert Hayes, his former commanding officer." "What are you doing here?" Elias asked. Hayes glanced toward the kennels, then back at him. "I got a call," he said. "About a Marine on the side of I-5. Elias's jaw tightened. "I'm not a Marine anymore." Hayes shook his head. "That's not how it works." They stood there, two men shaped by the same wars, looking at a broken dog and a fragile puppy, and at each other. Hayes exhaled slowly. "You saved them." Elias didn't answer. Hayes nodded. "Yeah. You did." And for the first time in years, Elias felt something stir beneath the grief. Not pain. Purpose. Captain Hayes didn't stay long. He never did. Men like him were shaped to deliver information, not linger in emotion. But before he left, he placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, firm, grounding. "Semper Fidelis," Hayes said quietly. Elias nodded once. "Always." When the clinic doors closed behind Hayes, the silence felt different. Not empty. Just, open. Elias turned back toward the kennels, toward the steady rhythm of Valkyrie's breathing and the soft, impatient squeaks coming from Scout's enclosure. This was where he belonged now. The following weeks unfolded slowly, deliberately, like a long rehabilitation march. Every day had structure. Morning feedings. Short walks. Physical therapy sessions for Valkyrie's damaged legs. Bottle feeding Scout every 4 hours, even through the night. Elias followed the routine with military precision, setting alarms, logging progress, noting changes. Valkyrie hated the leash at first. The first time Elias clipped it on, her body locked instantly. Her ears flattened. Her eyes darted wildly, breath coming fast and shallow. The leash wasn't a leash to her, it was a chain. Elias crouched in front of her and waited. Minutes passed. Then 10. He didn't speak. Didn't touch her. He just stayed. Eventually, her breathing slowed. Her eyes softened, just a fraction. "That's it," he murmured. "You're in charge. I'm just walking with you." The first walk was only 6 steps. The second was 10. By the end of the week, they made it to the end of the block. Scout, meanwhile, grew like wildfire once his body stabilized. His ribs softened beneath new weight. His coat thickened. His eyes, once dull and unfocused, brightened with curiosity. He learned Elias's scent quickly, scrambling toward him with awkward enthusiasm every time he entered the room. Valkyrie watched every interaction. She didn't interfere. She didn't growl. She simply tracked Scout's movements with laser focus, her body always angled between him and anything unfamiliar. Protective. Vigilant. Alive. One afternoon, as Elias sat on the floor bottle-feeding Scout, Sarah joined him, leaning against the counter. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. Elias glanced up. "I'm thinking about right now." Sarah smiled faintly. "Figures." She hesitated. Animal control followed up. "No microchip. No records. Whoever did this planned it." Elias's jaw tightened. "Any leads?" "Nothing solid." She sighed. "But there's something else." She handed him a folder. Inside were forms. Medical assessments. Behavioral evaluations. At some point, Sarah said gently, the clinic won't be able to keep them. Especially her. Elias didn't look up. "They're not staying here." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Elias. I have land," he said. "Outside the city. Fenced. Quiet. No traffic. No cages." She studied his face carefully. "You're serious." "I've never been more serious about anything." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we'll need to prepare her. Controlled exposure. Desensitization. It won't be easy." Elias closed the folder. Nothing worth doing ever is. The first time Elias brought Valkyrie outside the clinic's fenced yard, she froze. The open sky terrified her. Without walls, without boundaries, the world felt too big, too unpredictable. She pressed herself against Elias's leg, muscles shaking. He knelt beside her. "I know," he whispered. "We'll take it slow." They stood there for nearly 20 minutes before she took a single step forward. When she did, Elias felt it like a victory parade marching through his chest. At night, the nightmares came. Valkyrie woke with violent shudders, claws scraping against the floor, teeth snapping at ghosts only she could see. Elias never restrained her. Never shouted. He sat with her. He hummed. He placed a steady hand against her chest until her breathing matched his. Sometimes, Scout crawled over and pressed his small body against her side, grounding her in the present. Those nights, Elias didn't sleep. He didn't need to. Weeks passed. Then months. The paperwork cleared. The foster arrangement became permanent. Valkyrie was officially deemed non-adoptable. Elias signed the final document without hesitation. Non-adoptable didn't mean unlovable. The day they left the clinic, Valkyrie hesitated at the door. The outside world waited beyond it, wind, sound, freedom. Elias clipped on her leash and opened the door wide. "You're not trapped anymore," he said. "You can choose." She stood there for a long moment. Then she walked forward. The drive to Elias's land was quiet. Scout slept in a crate beside Valkyrie, who lay alert but calm, eyes scanning the windows as unfamiliar scenery rolled past. When they arrived, the gate creaked open to reveal rolling grass, tall trees, and open space stretching to the horizon. Valkyrie stepped out slowly. She sniffed the air. Then she ran. Not fast. Not wild. Just enough to feel the ground beneath her paws without fear. Scout tumbled out behind her, chasing her shadow, barking with pure, unfiltered joy. Elias watched from the porch, chest tight, eyes burning. Sarah had been wrong. This wasn't the end of Valkyrie's usefulness. This was the beginning of her life. And for Elias Thorne, who had spent years standing watch over ghosts, it was the first time home didn't feel empty. Life on the land didn't soften overnight. Healing never does. The quiet Elias had craved came with its own challenges, sounds carried farther out here, and silence itself could feel like pressure. Wind through the trees snapped branches without warning. Coyotes called at dusk. Thunder rolled across open fields like artillery. The first storm nearly broke Valkyrie. It came in hard and sudden, black clouds swallowing the sky, rain slamming into the tin roof like thrown gravel. Thunder cracked so close it rattled the windows. Valkyrie bolted for the far corner of the house, body rigid, eyes wild. She paced in tight circles, nails clicking against the floor, breath coming fast and sharp. Elias didn't rush her. He turned off the lights. Lowered the blinds. Reduced the world to something manageable. "It's just weather," he said softly, though he knew words didn't matter. Presence did. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, legs stretched out. He hummed, low and steady, letting the sound fill the room like a steady heartbeat. Scout toddled over and curled against Elias's thigh, confused but calm. Valkyrie watched from the corner. Another thunderclap boomed. She flinched, then, hesitantly, took a step toward them. Elias kept humming. She took another. By the time the storm passed, Valkyrie lay pressed against his side, Scout tucked between them, all three breathing in the same slow rhythm. The house creaked and settled. The night moved on. After that, progress came in uneven steps. Some days Valkyrie explored the property with quiet confidence, nose to the ground, tail lifting just slightly as she mapped her new territory. Other days, a sudden sound sent her spiraling back into fear, her body forgetting everything it had learned. Elias never scolded her. "Forward is forward," he told her once, after she refused to leave the porch for an entire afternoon. "Even when it's slow." Scout grew into his paws quickly. His clumsiness faded, replaced by a sharp intelligence and boundless curiosity. He followed Valkyrie everywhere, mimicking her posture, her pauses, her alert stillness. She tolerated him at first. Then accepted him. Then, one quiet evening, she corrected him gently with a nudge of her nose when he strayed too far. Elias saw it happen from the porch. Training instincts didn't vanish. They waited. The first time Valkyrie barked at a stranger, Elias froze. A man had stopped at the gate, middle-aged, harmless, asking about a broken fence line. Valkyrie stepped forward, body squared, bark deep and commanding. Not frantic. Not fearful. Controlled. Elias watched closely. Valkyrie glanced back at him once, checking. "That's enough," Elias said calmly. She stopped instantly. The man backed up, hands raised. "Good dog," he muttered, more relieved than amused. Elias clipped the leash on Valkyrie and led her away, heart pounding. That night, he sat at the kitchen table long after dark, paperwork spread out before him. Behavioral assessments. Training manuals. Old field notes from a life he thought he'd buried. A thought took shape, quiet at first, then insistent. Valkyrie didn't need to be fixed. She needed a mission. The call came 2 weeks later. It was Sarah. "I know this might sound crazy," she said carefully, "but I told someone about Valkyrie." Elias closed his eyes. "Go on." "There's a veteran outreach group," Sarah continued. "They work with trauma survivors, humans and animals. They're looking for a proof of concept. A pair." Elias didn't answer right away. "She'd have full control," Sarah added quickly. "Slow introductions. Strict boundaries. No crowds." Elias looked across the room at Valkyrie, who lay near the door, ears tuned to his voice, watching him with quiet intensity. "What's the mission?" he asked. "Helping others stand watch again," Sarah said. Elias exhaled slowly. "Bring them out." The first meeting was tense. The outreach group arrived in 2 unmarked vehicles. 3 people stepped out. Calm. Measured. They followed Elias's rules without complaint. No sudden movements. No direct eye contact. Valkyrie stayed by Elias's side, body alert but steady. They didn't push. They just observed. "She's not broken," one of them said quietly. "She's disciplined." Elias felt a tight knot in his chest loosen. Training began gently. Familiar commands. Simple tasks. Valkyrie responded immediately, muscle memory rising to the surface like something remembered in a dream. Scout watched everything, absorbing it all. Weeks turned into months. Valkyrie's confidence grew. Her fear didn't disappear, but it no longer ruled her. She learned to move through it, not around it. She learned that her strength had purpose beyond survival. So did Elias. The first veteran Valkyrie worked with was a young man named Lucas. He barely spoke. Flinched at sudden sounds. Wouldn't sit with his back to a door. Valkyrie didn't crowd him. She sat nearby. Alert. Present. When Lucas's hands began to shake, Valkyrie stood and leaned gently against his leg, grounding him without demand. Lucas cried. So did Elias, quietly, from the doorway. Healing didn't look like miracles. It looked like moments. Small, hard-earned moments stacked one on top of another. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Elias understood something important. He hadn't been saved on that highway. He had been reassigned. The work changed them all. It didn't happen with ceremonies or announcements. There were no banners hung on fences or applause when Valkyrie completed a session without freezing, when Lucas sat through an entire hour without checking the exits, when Elias slept through a night without waking to the echo of memory. It happened quietly. The outreach group began coming twice a week. Sometimes they brought veterans. Sometimes first responders. Sometimes just coffee and silence. Elias's land became a place where no one was required to explain themselves. They could sit. Walk. Breathe. Valkyrie learned the rhythm of the work. She understood when she was on duty and when she was free. Her posture shifted subtly the moment a session began, shoulders squared, head high, attention sharp. She moved slowly, deliberately, never forcing contact. She waited for invitation. Scout watched her like an apprentice. He was bigger now, legs long and strong, ears still slightly too large for his head. He mirrored Valkyrie's movements, copying her sit, her pause, her watchful stillness. She corrected him when needed, not with aggression, but with patience. Elias trained them both. The old skills came back faster than he expected. Structure. Consistency. Trust. He used hand signals more than words. He kept his tone level. Predictable. Safe. One afternoon, a veteran named Mark arrived unannounced. He didn't make it past the gate. Mark stood frozen, knuckles white around the chain-link fence, chest rising and falling too fast. His eyes were locked on Valkyrie, who stood calmly beside Elias, tail low, ears forward. "She's too big," Mark whispered. "I can't." "That's okay," Elias said gently. "You don't have to come in." Mark shook his head, frustration twisting his face. "I came all this way." Valkyrie sat down. Slowly. Deliberately. She turned her head slightly away, making herself smaller without retreating. Elias didn't prompt her. Mark swallowed. Took one step forward. Then another. When Mark finally crossed the gate line, his knees buckled. Elias was there instantly, steadying him, guiding him to the bench near the oak tree. Valkyrie approached only when Mark nodded. She rested her head against his knee. Mark sobbed openly, hands buried in her fur. "I forgot what it felt like," he said through tears. "To be watched over instead of watched for." That night, Elias sat alone on the porch long after everyone had left. Valkyrie lay at his feet, Scout stretched across her back, using her like a living pillow. "You're good at this," Elias said quietly. Valkyrie lifted her head and looked at him. "You were always good," he continued. "They just broke you before they understood what you were." The word surprised him. They applied to more than one of them. The outreach group began documenting progress. Case notes. Testimonials. Videos. They spoke carefully about expansion, about replicating the model in other places. Elias listened, but he didn't rush. "Growth without foundation collapses," he said. "We build slow." They agreed. Then the call came that tested everything. A woman named Dana arrived late one evening, long after scheduled hours. Her voice on the phone had been brittle, barely holding together. "I heard about the dog," she'd said. "I don't know why, but I think she might help." Dana didn't come alone. She brought a boy. He was maybe 10 years old. Silent. Hollow-eyed. His hands never left the sleeves of his oversized hoodie. When he saw Valkyrie, he froze, breath hitching. "She won't hurt you," Dana said quickly, too quickly. Elias knelt to the boy's level. "She won't come any closer unless you ask her to." The boy stared at Valkyrie. Valkyrie sat. Minutes passed. Scout lay down beside her, chin on his paws, tail thumping once against the dirt. The boy took a step forward. Then another. He stopped just out of reach. "Does she have scars?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Elias said. "Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes." The boy nodded. "Me too." He reached out slowly and placed his hand on Valkyrie's shoulder. She didn't move. Dana collapsed onto the bench, shaking with silent sobs. They stayed until the stars came out. After they left, Elias locked the gate and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, helping others stand watch again. He understood it now. This wasn't about dogs or training or even healing. It was about belonging. Weeks later, Animal Control called. They had a suspect. A man with a history of illegal breeding, abandonment, prior complaints. Enough evidence to move forward. Elias listened quietly as the officer explained the process. "Do you want to make a statement?" she asked. Elias looked across the field at Valkyrie, who was running, really running now, Scout chasing after her in wide, joyful arcs. "Yes," he said. "I do." The hearing was short. Clinical. The man never looked up. When it was over, Elias stepped outside and let the cool air fill his lungs. Justice wasn't loud. But it was real. That evening, Elias sat with Valkyrie under the oak tree as the sun dipped low. "You kept your post," he said softly. "Even when no one deserved it." Valkyrie leaned into him, solid and warm. "And you still chose to trust." Scout barked once, chasing a moth through the grass. Elias smiled. The story wasn't over yet. But for the first time, it felt like it was finally moving forward. The oak tree had become their anchor. It stood at the edge of the field, wide and weathered, its roots breaking through the soil like old knuckles. Elias often sat beneath it in the evenings, back against the trunk, watching the light shift across the land. Valkyrie usually lay beside him, her body stretched out, relaxed but aware. Scout ranged farther now, darting through tall grass, doubling back often as if checking that the world was still where he left it. Change had settled in quietly. The outreach program expanded, not outward, but deeper. Fewer sessions. More intention. Veterans returned again and again, drawn less by structure and more by something they couldn't name. The land held space for them. Valkyrie held the line. She had developed a way of reading people that no checklist could explain. With some, she kept distance, offering presence without contact. With others, she leaned in, grounding them when memories pulled too hard. She never forced connection. She invited it. Elias watched it happen dozens of times, still marveling at the precision of it. Valkyrie wasn't reacting anymore. She was choosing. Scout began formal training once his body caught up with his enthusiasm. He lacked Valkyrie's gravity but made up for it with intuition. Where she was steady, he was bright. Where she anchored, he lifted. They balanced each other. One afternoon, Sarah visited with a small group from the clinic. She hadn't been out to the land since the early days, and she stood quietly now, taking it all in, the open space, the calm, the way Valkyrie moved among people without tension. "You built something," Sarah said softly. Elias shook his head. "She did." Sarah smiled. "You gave her the chance." Later, as the sun dipped low, Sarah approached Valkyrie and knelt, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. Valkyrie watched her carefully, then stepped forward and rested her head briefly against Sarah's shoulder. Sarah laughed quietly, wiping at her eyes. "I was wrong about you," she whispered. Elias didn't correct her. Time passed the way it's meant to when healing is real, not rushing, not dragging. Just unfolding. Scout grew into his strength. His coordination sharpened. His confidence bloomed. Valkyrie corrected him less and trusted him more, allowing him to take the lead in small moments. Elias saw it for what it was. Succession. One evening, as dusk settled over the field, Valkyrie didn't rise when Scout bounded toward the gate. She stayed where she was, watching, alert but calm. Scout paused, glanced back at her, then continued on, posture shifting into something more deliberate. Elias felt his chest tighten. She wasn't stepping back. She was passing it on. Valkyrie still worked, but shorter sessions now. Longer rests. She preferred the shade of the oak tree, the quiet moments when Elias sat beside her, hand resting against her shoulder. Her scars had faded, but they never disappeared. Neither had his. The anniversary of Sarah's death came again, as it always did. This time, Elias didn't go to the cemetery alone. He brought Valkyrie. Scout stayed home, still too young for the weight of that place. Valkyrie walked beside Elias through the rows of headstones, her pace measured, respectful. When they reached Sarah's marker, Elias knelt and placed the lilies down. "You'd have liked her," he said quietly. "She's stubborn. Brave. Loyal to a fault." Valkyrie sat beside him. I think you'd understand, he continued. How someone can break you, and still not take who you are. The wind stirred the grass. The world kept moving. Elias stood, resting a hand on Valkyrie's head. Thank you, he said. On the drive home, Elias realized something that startled him with its simplicity. He wasn't carrying the grief alone anymore. Months later, a letter arrived from the Outreach Group's board. They wanted to formalize the program. Give it a name. Expand carefully, intentionally. They asked Elias what he wanted to call it. He didn't answer right away. That evening, he sat beneath the oak tree, Valkyrie pressed against his side, Scout sprawled nearby, half asleep. What do you think? Elias asked quietly. Valkyrie lifted her head and looked out across the land. Elias smiled. He wrote back the next morning. The watch. Because that's what it had always been about. Standing between danger and the vulnerable. Holding the line when no one else would. Not because you're unbreakable, but because you choose not to leave. As the seasons changed, Valkyrie slowed. Not in spirit. In body. Her steps grew measured. Her rests longer. Elias adjusted without complaint, without grief rushing ahead of reality. Scout took on more responsibility, his presence confident, his instincts sure. Valkyrie watched him with quiet pride. One late afternoon, as the sun painted the field gold, Valkyrie lay beneath the oak tree and didn't rise. Elias felt it before he knew it. He knelt beside her, hand against her chest, feeling the slow, steady beat. I'm here, he whispered. Her eyes met his. There was no fear in them. Just trust. Scout padded over and lay down on her other side, pressing close. They stayed like that as the light faded. When Valkyrie finally rested her head and let out one last, gentle breath, Elias didn't panic. He didn't beg. He stayed. He held the watch. Later, after the vet came and went, after the stars filled the sky, Elias buried Valkyrie beneath the oak tree where she had learned to rest. He marked the place with a simple stone. She stood the line. Scout sat beside him, quiet and steady. The next morning, the land woke as it always did. The wind moved through the grass. The sun rose. Life continued. Scout took his place at the edge of the field, posture alert, eyes scanning the horizon. Elias watched him and felt the familiar weight settle into his chest. Not grief. Responsibility. He stepped onto the porch and stood beside the dog. Together, they faced the open world. And the watch continued.